Throughout the weekend, I want everyone who is currently in this room to continue to evaluate whether or not they need to be in this room in order to enjoy the content that we are providing. We have taken every step possible to ensure your safety while you are here. You enjoyed a cafeteria-style lunch. We have stocked hand sanitizer everywhere, and I would ask that you make it a habit of every time you move throughout the hotel to utilize that hand sanitizer. We're also working with the hotel to ensure that all commonly touched spaces are continuously cleaned throughout the day. It is the best that we can do. And again, I just want to acknowledge that this is serious. And so if you don't need to be here, you can join us virtually, okay? And so we have a number of speakers from throughout the industry that we are excited to have join us, as they have throughout the history of this conference. Many of them will be joining virtually, including many of our research presenters. And so we are excited about the quality of the content that we have put together, and SABR is really proud of our continued ability to be connected to sabermetrics and the advanced analytics that are inside baseball today. With that being said, I'm excited for the 2.5 days of programming that we've put together, and I am really in particular thrilled to bring up our first speaker, who since 2012, I believe, has been kind of the unofficial official ambassador of the SABR Analytics Conference. Brian Kenny is the host of MLB Now, which, for those of you that are not aware, is the Thinking Fans show. And it is the only show that you can watch that is about advanced analytics inside of baseball. And so whenever I get asked, hey, how do I get introduced to this? How do I start to learn a little bit? It's Brian's show. Brian does an incredible job of introducing these concepts to fans, and in a way that allows them to feel as if it is part of how they should be enjoying the game. Brian has been, Brian also appears elsewhere on MLB Network, but he's a 25-year national TV anchor, including 14 years at ESPN, where he did SportsCenter, he did Baseball Tonight. He also has written a book, Ahead of the Curve. And so, to get us started on the 9th annual SABR Analytics Conference, Mr. Brian Kenny.
Good afternoon. I'm not here virtually. I'm here in the flesh, baby, as Hulk Hogan once said, and it's a pleasure to see you here. Yes, strange times, so it's different. I don't know, we salute, we can, forearm bash, do that sort of thing as we see each other, but it's good to see the people that are physically here. It's been a pleasure to be here all through the years since I've been at MLB Network, going back, I guess 7 years ago, which doesn't seem that much time. But when I was asked, hey, give the opening remarks and give the state of analytics, I thought it is a little trickier this year, isn't it? Given the state of affairs and the state of the scandal in the off season, because it was 7 years ago where I stood right here, basically, at this conference, and I asked the audience, how many of you out there, 5 years from now, see the Astros winning 90 games a year? And it was met with laughter because they stunk. It was an absurd thought that the Astros were going to be a 90-win team, let alone on a regular basis. But I believed in their brain power. I believed in their process. I believed in Jeff Luhnow and his whole team going to the Astros. I called them the grand sabermetric experiment. So I rode that train all the way through World Series championships, when they proved everybody wrong. So what are we to think of the Astros now? Wow, an actual boo. Yeah, the answer is, I don't know. I don't know yet. They're in disgrace. It certainly feels dirty, what they did, at least along those lines in this one area. I mean, they won, what? They broke a franchise record for wins twice They won 100 wins, 100-win seasons, 3 straight years, World Series title, 2 pennants, and yet they're disgraced. So I'll just offer some background since we're kind of split here. Maybe it's because of the travel restrictions and everything else, but we definitely have a demographic. We have 2 demographics, and I would title them old and young. Because we have so many students here in the future of analytics and sabermetrics and the people getting into the business, and then those who I've seen here year after year, and like myself, who got into it in the early days of Bill James and John Thorne, Pete Palmer, Rob Nyer, who is here as well, and the people who kind of grew up with this movement. But players have always tried to steal signs. It's their thing. Many teams have gone beyond the boundaries of fair play to do it. You know, when I think about this, and I think about, and I'll tell you honestly, my honest reaction when the commissioner, when I saw those rulings, and I was one of the first people to see it because I was anchoring the show on MLB Network that day, I got it just before it came out, I was stunned. I mean, those were strong penalties. I didn't expect that, and I'll have more on that in a second, but I didn't expect that. I then didn't expect the outrage throughout the baseball community. At MLB Network, I can't speak for everyone, but a good number of us were surprised on a daily basis how it kept going and how that level of outrage was there, a level of outrage that we just haven't seen in baseball with, going through all the scandals of the last generation. But it did make me think, the most famous home run in the history of baseball was hit with a stolen sign. The most famous home run, not some obscure 1890s John McGraw old-style hooligan baseball. We're talking 1951, Willie Mays was on the team. The Dodgers and the Giants, the shot heard round the world. The Giants had a sign-stealing scheme going using a telescope and buzzers, using what was then the latest technology. The most famous home run in baseball history, and are they disgraced? Again, I don't know. It came out, it was big news. It was a team that went, I think it was 37-7 down the stretch. A lot of things were working for the Giants down the stretch, including knowing what pitches were coming. So, of course, it helps. I don't know if you knew this. Peter Gammons had a piece in The Athletic a few weeks back. He pointed out that Hank Greenberg had one of his biggest seasons. Hank Greenberg is 500 home run club. He's a Hall of Famer. And, one of the most famous home run hitters of baseball history. He had one of his biggest seasons, excuse me, a year where he was using stolen signs. They had a guy with a telescope in the stands. Actually, Peter wrote, attached to a rifle. You can't do that anymore. But attached to a rifle, had the skull. They couldn't, hey, does the telescope come off the rifle? Maybe we could do that. But they had the telescope, stealing signs. Hank Greenberg said he used that to have one of his biggest offensive seasons of his career. Now, you might be asking, how could Peter Gammons write such a thing about a beloved Hall of Famer? It's because Hank Greenberg wrote it in his autobiography. He wrote about it. I wasn't bragging about it, I guess, but he wrote about it. I even had to look. When did that autobiography come out? It was 1989. I was a working sportscaster, a young fledgling sportscaster, but I was a young sportscaster at the time, going to the Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. That was not big news. Now, it happens now, and there's outrage. And look, I'm glad there's outrage, but this sort of thing has happened. It's been happening for a long time. Was it viewed as wrong? Yeah. It was viewed as right on the line. Now, I'm glad the line has been drawn somewhere. But let's first deal with analytics' role in all of this. How did this happen? And I've had more than one friend come up to me, guys who have known me for years and who are kind of in this movement, guys I just saw at recent fights and boxing events that I do as well, and they'll come up, I haven't seen them in a while, and they'll say, well, we sure ruined everything, didn't we? And I'm thinking, I don't know, is this meaning your fault? I don't know. It's a convergence of worlds, that's for sure, where you had these players who are hungry for this through the history of baseball. They want to know the signs. Then you have a whole staff, what is now known as baseball ops, and a wing of that baseball ops department is devoted and travels with the team to do basically what's baseball military intelligence. Now, eventually those worlds were going to collide. where they're going to look over and say, hey, I'm going to check my at-bats on that video monitor behind the dugout. It's pretty handy. It's sitting right there. Next thing, hey, we're looking at the catcher's signs to get the signals so we can decode them so we know pitch sequences, so we know it for future dates. It's a matter of time before it comes, hey, how about getting them today? How about getting them while I'm there? Now, you might remember the baseball ops department, this was according to Jared Diamond in the Wall Street Journal, they were concocting a sign-stealing segment for their baseball ops department. It was called Codebreaker. But even the players said Codebreaker was too slow and cumbersome. It wasn't getting to them in time. So they went street. They got the garbage cans. They got, just signals. They were whistling. They were doing all sorts of things. I mean, that's old school. Get the garbage cans and bang the garbage can. That's not new school. But it was this convergence of worlds that went together and collided, and they lost track of where the line was. I mean, clearly. Now, were other teams doing it? We've still yet to find out. We haven't had the ruling on the Red Sox yet. We don't know. And how bad was it? Is it just a disgraced Astros team the way we feel now? Again, I don't know yet. I read this over the weekend. I actually got a book from Chuck Klosterman this week that I hadn't read. If you haven't read his stuff, it's interesting. A lot of it is rock and roll stuff, but it's also human nature. And he wrote the following, and I thought it applied to this off-season of scandal. We constantly pretend our perception of the present day will not seem ludicrous in retrospect, simply because there doesn't appear to be any other option. So what we're thinking now, I don't think we're going to be thinking in 10 years. I like that the players were outraged. I like that. I was looking for player outrage for about 20 years during the steroid scandal. And it's still the steroid era. We're always going to be dealing with that. That's going to be a constant management issue because you're always going to have to draw the line somewhere as to what you can take and what you can't take. I was waiting for player outrage there, where it's like in a corrupt police precinct. Where are the clean cops? They have to speak out. Frank Serpico. You ever see the movie Serpico? Anybody? I'm going to look to someone who's older. There we go. Serpico, yeah, you guys. It's actually playing. It was on cable the other day. Anybody get cable? No? Yeah. Get cable. It's great. Serpico was on. He was a police officer in New York City who saw all this corruption around him and spoke out about it eventually, and did so with his life at risk. And he said that we only have a flourishing society when the clean cop is not afraid of the dirty cop. And what they had was the clean cops were afraid of the dirty cops. What we had in baseball was the clean players were afraid of the dirty players, or for some reason protecting them. So I'm glad that players were outraged and they thought, that's cheating, that's no good. A code of conduct would be nice. It would be between the players as to what's okay and what's not okay going forward, because this stuff will continue. I don't know how you start. I'm sure there's people here doing presentations for technology. As one of the thoughts to limit this sort of thing is to eliminate technology completely, which kind of goes against everything that society is going for. Maybe that's the answer, I don't know. But I think it's going to be very difficult to shut it down completely. So the one thing that I did like was in baseball, this wink and a nod culture, that maybe that doesn't have to continue. What Rob Manfred did, the commissioner of baseball, and I was stunned when he slammed these guys. A year suspension without pay. And then, of course, fired. And then Alex Cora fired. And then Carlos Beltran fired before he could even manage, right? It happened immediately. People were outraged. Big teams, guys lost jobs. I know players not punished, but you can't get to everybody. They got to a remarkable amount. And again, when it happened, it was stunning. But I like that finally, because for years, if you were growing up as I was over the last 50 years, watching baseball, most of what you always heard, and maybe the older people can back me up on this, was, well, what are you going to do? Wink and a nod. What are you going to do? Collisions at the plate. Why are there collisions at the plate? Yeah, what are you going to do? We've always done that. Collisions at second base. What are you going to do? Steroids. How are you going to stop it? Beanballs. What are you going to do? You can never tell if they're trying to throw at a guy or not. Yeah, you can. You can try. And what this said is, this time, no wink, no nod. These things can be corralled. You can disincentivize that. Along those lines, quick thought, look, collisions behind the plate, gone. Collisions at second base, gone. You can get rid of these things. It all happened in the recent administration under Rob Manfred. Boom, you can get rid of these things. So you can disincentivize these things from happening. And this is one of the first times I've seen it, except for, possibly when A-Rod was so egregious with his steroid use and they suspended him for a full season. That was a rarity. But I like that finally it was, no, we have standards. There's a line you can't cross. And perhaps we need to go there with steroids as well. Perhaps you need to, because you're never just going to stay ahead of it and say, hey, we're done with that. You're never going to be done with it. So maybe you have to get stricter, maybe you have to get stronger to disincentivize these things. Be outraged. I like that the players are speaking out. I said it on the air during my shows, during MLB Tonight. This guy speaks out. This guy, good. They're angry, say it. Say your piece. Maybe that's the new generation, that they're like, hey, I don't have to hide behind the code of silence. And who am I protecting? Am I protecting these guys? Yeah, good. Don't. Look out for yourself. Look out for the greater good of the game. And as for the state of analytics, I think we can see the strength of it here. It wasn't long ago that guys like you, unless one of you is a great ball player, would have had very little chance of working in Major League Baseball. Do you realize that? Except for a lot of people, maybe over on this side of the room, and people who originated this conference, you would have had no chance at working in Major League Baseball, unless you were a great baseball player and you could have made the major leagues. Very little chance. Much more of a meritocracy now. It's a much smarter game now. And that's the wave that will come through. Long beyond past where we're not talking about the Astros anymore, we'll be talking about that. So it's great to see so many young people here. It's great to see new faces. It's good to see all the faces here that since you made it out and that you're here. And I just hope you have a great conference. I know I've always enjoyed it. If you get a chance to talk to some of the people who have been through this entire movement, you might be amazed by some of the stories. But now it is just swept through the game in an accelerated pace. Even I haven't seen analytics exploding the way it has happened over the last few years. It wasn't long ago that you couldn't even get guys to take walks seriously as an offensive component. And now teams like the Brewers, who were one of the last to adopt analytics and sabermetrics, have their entire old clubhouse in spring training is a performance maximizing lab. It's amazing how everything has twisted around. And that means jobs, that means smarter baseball, and also organizations that will have to keep their eye on their hyper efficiency and their quest for competitive advantage. Because as we've seen, it can go wrong, it can go too far. But thank you very much and enjoy the conference. Thank you, everybody.